Analysing non-fiction video, I want to discuss what to do when you first examine a text. So let's see some tips for an initial analysis. Now, as a student of language and literature, when you come across a text, don't forget to grasp it. Well, what does this mean? G.R.A.S.P is a great acronym to help us analyse a text. It stands for genre, register, audience, subject and purpose. Let's break this down. You might have to analyse an article, a speech, a poster, a play, or a novel. These are just a few genres, and even within these, there are subgenres to consider. For instance, a novel might be a science fiction novel or a romance novel. An article might be informative or persuasive. First, ask yourself, what type of text is it? To which genre and subgenre does it belong? Then, how does the genre affect the style and language? For instance, if it's an article, you might expect to see big headings, images, and fairly formal language. Finally, consider if the text adheres to the genre conventions or breaks them. If a text does go against the usual genre conventions, why might this be important? If a poster, which might usually have images, has none, then consider why this change has been made. Now, register is just a fancy word meaning the formality of language. Is the text formal or informal? Ask yourself why a speaker has used that level of formality. Now, with register, there are a few terms we should use to describe it. The first of them is frozen. Think about the language being frozen in time, like farewell and Godspeed. You might see this in ceremonies or ceremonial documents. The second is formal. You might see this in job interviews, public addresses. The third is consultative. Now, consultative is still formal and it comes with some authority, but it's a little bit more personal than formal. Now, this might be found in articles and speeches. Next, we have the language of friends, casual, and finally, the language of lovers, intimate. Ask yourself which register is used and why. What effect is the text trying to have? Finally, with register comes the tone of the speaker or the author that they have used. Are they optimistic about the subject, critical, matter of fact, informative, urgent, sarcastic? These are just a few examples of tone that they might take. Next, we have audience. When you're looking at audience or you're thinking about the intended audience, consider the race, age, gender, and socio-economic status, and how the intended audience has affected the language and style. For instance, a movie poster aimed at teenage boys would contain vastly different images to one aimed at older women. An article aimed at a 50-year-old white male would likely differ to one aimed at a 20-year-old African American female. Identify the language, the style, the images and devices which might be aimed at this specific audience, thinking about their effect and purpose. Now, with subject, you're looking for the theme of the text. What is it about? What are the main ideas presented? Is it about racism, harassment, style, culture, the environment? What is literally happening in the text? What's going on in the images or in the story presented? Again, think about language, style, layout, or devices and how they're used to explore these themes. Finally, what is the purpose of the text? What is the text trying to achieve? Is it trying to argue, persuade, inform, or entertain? If it's trying to argue or persuade, what exactly is it trying to argue or persuade, and how does it go about doing this? Think about rhetorical appeals. Perhaps the text appeals to the audience's emotion or logic, sense of authority, or a combination. Maybe there are multiple rhetorical devices used to persuade or argue. If the text is trying to inform, what exactly is it trying to inform? Is there a bias which can be seen in the language or layout? And considering the text purpose, think about how effective it is. To reiterate, how have language, style, images, layout, or devices been used for this purpose? Now, it's time to see an example. Take this poster. I'm going to grasp it. But first I need to make some space in order to annotate and make notes. Now I'll begin with genre. I'll ask myself the questions. What type of text is it? How does the genre affect style and language? And does the text adhere to the genre conventions or break them? Well, the text is definitely a poster. I know this because there's not a lot of text on it, and instead there are striking images and colours. Also, the heading is in large letters. These are all typical of posters. Added to this, there are statistics with factual information and contact info for those affected. The text adheres to the genre. All of these things are examples of things you would typically find on a poster. Next up then, register. Again, I'll ask myself the questions. How formal or informal is the text? Why has the author used that level of formality, and what tone of voice is used? Well, the text is consultative or formal, it's not casual or intimate, and that is to have an authoritative and urgent tone. Now, this is explored through the heading and the statistics. The heading reminds me of a stop sign. It's very urgent and authoritative. And the statistics are matter of fact, they're informative, and so the whole text has an authoritative tone to it. But if you read this, the small print, it's also helpful and sympathetic. It says to us that if we witness or experience unwelcome behaviour, to please contact them. It feels as though the text is there for us, and thus has a helpful and sympathetic tone. Next up, audience. I'll ask myself the questions again. Who is the intended audience of the text? I'll consider race, age, gender, and socio-economic status, and I'll ask, how does the intended audience affect language and style? So again, I'd say it's aimed at women. I think this because of the colour choice. The pink, purple and red colours are often associated as female colours. The two characters are both female characters. Now, the Me Too hashtag is also something which would be familiar to female audiences, more so between the ages of maybe 16 and 40, those online engaged with social media such as Twitter. Now, I will address this, even though it's calling for audiences to stop harassment, it's not aimed at those who are harassing. It is aimed at the victims and the witnesses of harassment, encouraging them to speak up. Next, I'll move on to subject. What is the text about? What are the themes and ideas? What is literally happening in the text? And what impact does the subject have on language and style choices? Well, the theme is sexual harassment. There are two characters, as I've said, female figures with no faces or identities. They have their hands up like they're trying to protect themselves. Although you can't see it, it's like one of their hands is on their mouths. The hand in the foreground has the hashtag #MeToo on it. It's part of a movement on Twitter which encouraged women to no longer be silent and speak out about the times they've been harassed or assaulted, highlighting the problem. The hand in the back has tape marked on a cross. Now, this is a symbol often associated with being silenced, which is why the other hand might also look like it's over their mouths. Perhaps this is saying that women are often silenced and encourages women to speak up about harassment. At the bottom there are statistics, a large number signifying how big of a problem this is, and below is helpful contact information for victims and witnesses to speak to someone. In the right hand corner there is a ribbon. A ribbon is used as a symbol for awareness of various causes. As I've said, in bold letters at the top, there's a call to action, an order to stop, and the colour schemes really make this pop, like a warning. Finally then, we've got purpose. What is the text trying to achieve? What exactly is it trying to persuade, inform or argue, and how effective is this? In what ways has language and style been used for this purpose? Well, on the surface, while the poster seems to persuade people to stop harassing, that's not the case. It's really there to inform. It's there to inform audiences of how common harassment and assault really is, and provides basic information. The poster does persuade, but it encourages people to come forward and speak up. However, this is where I want to talk about how effective it is. I don't think the poster is very effective, because if its aim is to encourage victims to speak up, then the message can only be found upon closer inspection. At a first glance, the bold order to stop feels like it should be aimed at the people who are sexually harassing, but this isn't the case. If the aim is to encourage victims not to speak up, then the message should be the focus, the first thing noticed. So there we go. That's our analysis. I want to quickly go through how we might use the 3 levels with G.R.A.S.P. Now in level 3 is where we'll have many of the G.R.A.S.P elements to it. Level 3 is where we can talk about the purpose of the text. Is it there to inform, persuade, entertain, or argue? We can also think and discuss in level 3 the intended audience of the text and how audiences shape choices. Themes, main ideas also belong in level 3. Also, the effectiveness, the efficacy of the text is a level 3 element. And finally, genre is also level 3. In level 2, we can talk about the tone and the mood created. We can also discuss rhetorical appeal and finally, register. Leaving level 1, of course, language and style, images, layout, devices. Now remember, before you go, grasp the text with genre, register, audience, subject, and purpose. Ask yourself the questions. What type of text is it? How does the genre affect style and language? Does the text adhere to the genre conventions or break them? How formal or informal is the text? Why has the author used that level of formality? And what tone of voice is taken? Who is the intended audience of the text? Remember to consider the race, age, gender, and socio-economic status. And how does the intended audience affect language and style? Subject. What is actually happening in the text? What is it about? What are the main themes and ideas? What's the presented story? And what impact does the subject have on language and style? How are these themes explored? And finally, the purpose. What is the text trying to achieve? What exactly is it trying to persuade, inform, or argue? And in what ways has language and style been used for this purpose?